Ahmed, great to see you back in India. I remember we first met in 1988 when you were covering the negotiations that led to the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Right.
And now we seem to be on the brink of another withdrawal.
Right.
Is that really going to happen, or do you think that they're going to stop somewhere before the dreaded zero option?
No, I think the Americans are going. They will leave maybe a force of 10,000 or 12,000 troops behind for training purposes and intelligence purposes, but certainly not a force which would be sufficient to fight the Taliban. And that is now going to depend upon the Afghan army. I just hope that these elections take place in an amicable atmosphere, that they're accepted by the majority of the Afghan people, and then we can really talk about a dialogue with the Taliban and ending the war. But that's a big hope. This is Afghanistan, and we've been, involved. You've been involved with Afghanistan also. I mean, for the last 35 years, we've had one war after another, and I mean, I hope that we're not faced with a multi-dimensional civil war.
Two reactions to what you said. First, of course, on the question of just leaving 10 or 12,000 behind. Will that be significant enough to cast a shadow on any potential insurgents or troublemakers? And the second question was, of course, when you talked about what will happen after and talking to the Taliban. Can you talk to people whose real agenda is to rule at the point of a gun? Is it feasible? Or can we only talk to elements who are genuine about actually entering some sort of civilian-led democratic process rather than seizing power at the battle of a gun?
Well, I think, the American presence is necessary because you need to convince not just the neighboring countries, but more importantly, the US Congress to keep giving the kind of money that is needed to fund the Afghan army. Nobody else is going to pay $4 or $5 billion a year. Some of the NATO countries will contribute, but you need the American presence to make sure that, Afghanistan remains a story in Washington rather than just disappears from the picture. As far as the Taliban, are concerned, look, there have been negotiations between the Americans and the Taliban. They broke down. There have been talks between Karzai and the Taliban. They broke down. Hopefully we could be looking at a new era where there's a new president who's not encumbered with this whole thing of being the stooge of the Americans, which the Taliban consider Karzai to be, and they find it very difficult to talk to him because he was inserted by the Americans and etc. etc.
Technically, he wasn't. He was inserted by Lakhdar Brahimi.
That's true. That's true.
But yes, they kind of blame the Americans for Karzai. And as you know, Karzai is actually a hate figure in much of Washington. The Americans don't see him as their puppet or their stooge. It's only the Taliban.
Absolutely. And, I think the mood has changed. And the Americans, in fact, are very impatient for a new president to come about, who they can talk to and they can strike this deal for a base.
But, there's that famous old limerick about the chap with a smile who rode on the back of a tiger, and after a while the tiger came back and the smile was on the face of the tiger.
Yeah.
Isn't that the kind of scenario you're seeing where you ride on the back of the Taliban and they take you over?
Look, I think there is a genuine peace lobby in the Taliban. I think the older generation are fed up with living in Pakistan for so many years. They want to go home. Their kids are not learning, the traditions. They're not learning the language that Pashto or Dari. They're learning Urdu. And secondly, I think this older generation know that they failed at governance in the 90s when they were ruling Afghanistan. And in fact, Afghanistan in 2001 was near collapse because of the Taliban misrule. All the foreign aid had gone, the UN had walked out, everybody had walked out. And the Taliban know that, they don't have any, they can't govern the country. In 6 months, they will antagonize the Afghan population so much that there will be an exodus of Afghans to Iran, to Pakistan, to India. And Afghanistan will be back where it started, 25 years ago. And so I think this, but there is also hardliners who are very influenced by Al-Qaeda who feel that, they deserve to rule the country, that they should rule the country.
And they have done it once, so why not again? That kind of feeling.
So, I mean,
how do you avoid talking to them while talking to the First Lord? How do you, because we don't choose who the Taliban sends to
Well,
talk
I
to.
think a great deal will depend on the outcome of the elections. But I think a great deal will depend on the attitude of the regional countries also. Pakistan has to push the Taliban into a dialogue with Kabul. And the other countries, India, Iran, the Arabs have to help in this process. We have not seen, unfortunately, enough regional effort by the regional countries to get a peace process moving. We've left it to the Americans, and that has really been very dangerous because the Americans have just not delivered. It's been very pitiful because the Americans have failed to see the importance of diplomacy and the need for this. And right to the end, the Americans were relying on military muscle. But, you know, we knew perfectly well that they can't defeat the Taliban. Ultimately, you have to try and absorb them into the political system.
The worry is whether people who feel they can win with the gun are going to be absorbable, but we'll have to see, as you said. The other thing that worries me when you mention so much about the presidential election is that it seems increasingly to be narrowing down to a choice between a Pashtun, the most popular Pashtun, who seems to be Rasool, though we don't really know. Karzai's brother just pulled out and endorsed him. And Abdullah, who is a non-Pashtun. Now imagine in the current political realities of Afghanistan, if a non-Pashtun wins, and he's a very attractive and able person, would that not immediately energize the Taliban insurgency? I mean, the irony is a fair election with multiple candidates may actually give you a result that doesn't give you the kind of stability you seek because it gives a sort of casus belli for the bad guys.
I agree with you. I mean, this is the whole point about democracy which the Afghans have not really got used to. The fact is that I think most people would still want to see a Pashtun president because ultimately a Pashtun president can better talk to the Taliban than a non-Pashtun president can. But on the other hand, as you say, Abdullah is extremely capable. He was foreign minister for many years. A very straight-talking guy, and a guy actually who can bring Pashtuns on board with him. He's not an ethnic sort of extremist in any way. So it's going to be very difficult, this election, and obviously Karzai is banking on his candidate, his favorite Pashtun candidate, which is probably Zalmi Rasool, to win so that Karzai can continue playing a role behind the scenes, even when he's not president.
Yeah, you're quite right. But finally, let's turn to the responsibilities of the regional powers. One of the issues that we all have, of course, is what exactly is the role that Pakistan is playing in Afghanistan. I think you're aware that many in India believe that the ISI, going back to the 90s, had a key role in creating, arming, officering, and guiding the Taliban, that they were the shadowy figures behind pretty much all the actions of the Taliban government, including the Kandahar hijacking, which still is a very, very bitter memory in this country, that they had continued to exercise influence. It was only 9/11 that forced the ISI at the point of an American gun to back off from the Frankenstein monster they'd created. Now, is Pakistan prepared to, shall we say, close its investment in this process, cut links with the Taliban and say it's really not in our interest to keep these guys going, we really want peace and stability? Or is there still a significant influential element within Pakistan, by which of course I also include the ISI and the military, that actually feels that Pakistan's fundamental strategic interest lies in control over who runs Kabul far more than a stable Kabul that may not be under Pakistani control?
Well, I think, first of all, the military is now totally beset with its own Taliban problem. As you know, the Pakistani Taliban are now really a force to be reckoned with and extremely dangerous. And they've killed hundreds and thousands of civilians and soldiers. And the new army chief who's come in is very adamant about going after them. So I think the and this is not going to be, a 3-month foray into the tribal areas. It's going to be a very long, sustained campaign in order to wipe out this terrorism. And I hope that the army and the civilians are going to get their act together and that they're going to have a strategy to do this. But this certainly means that I don't think we really want to see, number one, the Taliban coming back in Kabul in any way at all. Because a Taliban victory in any form or shape in Kabul
will embolden the Pakistanis.
Of course, will hugely embolden the Pakistani Taliban. So what we are lacking is, I think for the first time, intellectually we understand the need to back off from Afghanistan. Intellectually we understand the need to tackle our own problems of the Taliban. What we are still not seeing is that the full pivot has not been done on the ground.
Yeah.
And that needs to be done, because terrorism, of course, extends not just to the tribal areas, it extends to Lahore and Murid-ke and Lashkar-e-Taiba, Lashkar-e-Jangvi.
Except those come towards us, my dear.
Well,
all the Murid-ke boys are after India.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the if you have a policy of zero tolerance for terrorism, it means you have to take on all forms of terrorism.
Inside the Pakistani establishment, there are people who genuinely seem to think that terrorists who hit the Marriott in Islamabad are bad guys, and terrorists who hit the Taj in Bombay are good guys. Now, until that mentality changes, we will have a problem. But I hope you're right, and I hope that there is new thinking going on in Islamabad, and more important, in GHQ Rawalpindi. One final thought: is there any prospect of Pakistan joining India in not seeing Afghanistan as a zero-sum game, in joining with us to say that it's actually in our mutual interest to have stability and peace in Afghanistan, therefore in clamping down on those sources of terror that are coming from your territory, and finally in cooperating with things like regional transit, allowing Afghan goods to come to Indian markets and Indian goods to come to Afghanistan through Pakistan?
Look, I think that is, it has to happen. I mean, you know, if Afghanistan is going to see peace and stability, the region has to take greater responsibility to making sure that the economy in Afghanistan survives, and that means there has to be cooperation between India and Pakistan. After all, we want these pipelines and these roads to cross from Central Asia into Pakistan through Afghanistan, and perhaps to go on to India, trade, pipelines, oil and gas, etc., etc. This is the future of this region, and this is the only, I mean, you know, India has many other economic options right now. I mean, you're investing in the Far East and in Europe and in the United States, and there's massive investment going on inside India from abroad. We have very few economic options in Pakistan. And essentially our options lie, you know, with building up, you know, the indigenous economy, but essentially trading with the immediate neighbors and improving. Now, Afghanistan has been a block to that for 35 years. We have not been able to trade with Central Asia. Central Asia remains, unfortunately, locked up because of the routes through Pakistan and even Afghanistan have been beset by war and extremism. India has felt the same thing. I mean, you're trading with Central Asia through the Baltic. You know, you have to go all the way around, and you know, there's been no other way. And
we're developing Shah Bahar and Iran, or helping develop.
Yeah.
With a view to actually getting goods even into Afghanistan from Iran, which is like holding your nose from behind your head. You know, but we may have to do that.
But obviously, a land route across Pakistan would be the easiest.
It's the historic route. It's what's going on for 3,000 years.
Of course,
that's what we'd like to develop.
This is the old Silk Route, and you know, I really feel. I mean, the business interests in Pakistan, even in Punjab, which has been the most sort of bulwark, you know, anti-Indian bulwark in Pakistan, are now really, you know, very much aware of the need for opening up these borders, ending wars, opening up these borders, and doing trade and business. And it's not going to happen unless, of course, we open up all the land routes, including the route to India.
Great, Ahmed. It's lovely seeing you, and I hope that we know you'll continue to follow Afghanistan very closely. I hope we won't be having the same conversation in 26 years' time again. All the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.